This is Right to Life Radio with John Girardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Girardi.
Well, usually this show talks about abortion. Usually this show deals with abortion. Usually this whole organization was founded to talk about abortion. We have a list of organizational issues that we're supposed to talk about. And when Right to Life of Central California got started in the 1960s, in the late 1960s, nobody thought that we'd have to discuss infanticide. Everyone thought, America's pretty messed up with legalized abortion. America's pretty messed up with Roe v. Wade. But at least, we probably, if we're listing all the things we're going to talk about as an organization, we don't need to talk about infanticide. Well, unfortunately, that's not quite the case, as the events of the past week have demonstrated. Right to Life Radio, here on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. A production, as always, of Right to Life of Central California. Thank you all for tuning in. I am John Girardi, the Executive Director of Right to Life of Central California. I'm a lawyer. I'm a Gemini, and I like long walks on the beach. Joining me, as always, as often, as sometimes.
That's what his Notre Dame Facebook profile said.
That's what my old... Back in the days when Facebook was just for college kids, not for grandmas with pictures of minions. Although I've come around on Facebook. I used to think Facebook was great, and then I'm like, Facebook is lame now. So you have all these old grandmas like posting pictures of like cats and saying like, retweet this cat if you love President Trump. Yes. And I was like, Twitter's the place to be. Twitter's where all the cool people hang out. And now I'm like, you know what? Twitter sucks. Twitter is just full of horrible people. And maybe it's fine going on Facebook and seeing pictures of people's grandkids and pictures of the minions from Despicable Me, saluting the American flag or whatever. Joining me as often is the CEO of California Family Council, Mr. Jonathan Keller. What's up, Jonathan?
Hey, it's great to be back with you, John. It's been a little while. We've had some ships in the night.
We're busy men.
That's right.
Jonathan and I don't always hang out together every single day.
That's true.
We don't, Jonathan doesn't have his bed without an H and my bed with an H, like Ernie and Bert in their room, where there's the E on Ernie's headboard of his bed and the B for Bert. And Bert's bed is clean and Ernie's bed is messy.
I would say, though, that's a fairly apt analogy for our relationship. You are much more of the Bert and I am much more of the Ernie.
Yes.
Now that I'd never thought of it that way.
There you go.
If our wives were watching this live,
without the latent homosexual subtext.
That's true.
Anyway,
that's true.
Moving right along.
Unlike Bert and Ernie, John and I do have sexuality. We are not puppets, and we are both happily married to our wives.
So who are both ladies?
Yeah, who are both ladies.
Yeah,
that's right.
There you go. Anyway, glad we've clarified all that. Right to Life Radio here on...
This will not qualify for the explicit rating on iTunes, right?
No.
I think we're still good.
I think we're good. We have a few more F bombs to drop before the end of the episode.
We're
all
good.
right. We won't actually do that.
No, folks.
Right to Life Radio with John Girardi. Okay. So... I'm trying to have levity because we're literally talking about people voting against laws to stop murder. So
yes,
let's jump right into it. Okie dokie artichokes. We have a pretty bad story from this past week. The United States Senate introduced legislation. This legislation was aimed at filling up certain gaps that exist in the law regarding late-term abortions. What do you do with a child who survives a late-term abortion? Well, generally speaking, that child should be considered now a newborn member of the human race, a newborn member of American society, a U.S. citizen. So, that child should be afforded the same rights and privileges as any American citizen, and critically should be afforded the same quality and standards of medical treatment that any newborn child receives. In practice, though, as we learned during the Kermit Gosnell trial, not just about Kermit Gosnell's behavior, but the behavior of late-term abortionists in general, that is not always what happens. A lot of times in a late-term abortion situation, a lot of times in a late-term abortion situation, doctors will simply start providing what's called, quote, comfort care to infants and not actually try to provide normal, ordinary care to those infants to try to save their lives. So that's not good. That's obviously really, really bad. It is murder. It is murder by omission. It is letting a child who could survive die in a way that is really, really bad. Okay, so Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska, seeing this, and Senator Sasse was responding to this practice being the case and responding to the comments from the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, who amazingly still has a job.
Shocking.
The governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, talked at length about a piece of legislation that was being discussed, that was being debated in the Virginia legislature, and was saying that in the case where a child survives a late-term abortion, that basically the doctor and the mom would have a discussion.
They would revive the child if that's what the parents
want. And Senator Sasse was reacting to this, like I think any normal human being would, with revulsion, and introduced a piece of legislation in the Senate to try to stop this practice nationally, on a national level. And basically all this legislation said, this legislation has nothing to do with abortion. All this legislation said was, if a child survives an abortion and is now born, you have to give that kid the same kind of medical care as you would a normal child born alive. You can't alter the kind of medical care you give the child because the child was not wanted, because the child survived an abortion attempt. The legislation did not manage to get through the Senate. Now, in the Senate, the rules are kind of weird. Yes, a majority of senators voted in favor of the legislation. However, majority is not all enough in the Senate. In the Senate has these old traditions and rules where basically, in theory, the Senate is supposed to be our wiser and more deliberative body, as opposed to the rough and tumble House where people get elected and reelected every 2 years. Senators are supposed to be around for 6 full years.
You take the long, deliberative view.
Yeah.
You sit down
and
in
you
the
talk and talk.
The
and
warm
talk.
summer heat in your seersucker suits, and you.
This is Jonathan Keller attempting a Southern accent.
Southern accent. That's
anyway.
Right. You take a long time to discuss things and deliberate.
Yes.
Deliberate.
So in the Senate, in theory, debate can go on forever. In order to stop debate and actually have a vote on a piece of legislation, you need to invoke what's called cloture. C-L-O-T-U-R-E. Cloture. Basically, it's a vote to stop debate and actually vote on something. And you need 60 votes to stop debate and vote on something. Well, if you vote against cloture, you're basically voting against the bill, and requiring 60 votes to end debate means if you have even 41 senators who oppose something, you can stop something from passing in the Senate. And that's essentially what happened. The Republicans only got 53 votes to pass this piece of legislation. All but 3 Democrats voted against this legislation. Against legislation that, again, doesn't have anything to do with abortion. Only says that if a baby survives an abortion, then you need to give that baby the same kind of care you would give to any other baby. So that's pretty sad. It's pretty sad that the entire Democratic Party, with the exception of, I forget who the 3 senators were, Joe Manchin, the guy from Alabama,
Doug Jones. He's facing a tough re-election battle next year.
Yeah. And there was one other
remarkably
person.
Bob Casey.
And Bob Casey from Pennsylvania.
You have to take a token pro-life vote that doesn't cost you anything when you get a chance.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
You know, you don't want your father to roll over so fast in his grave that he tunnels out of there and his
that's true.
zombified corpse comes and punishes you for making a mockery of his great name.
So the Bob Casey, the senator from Pennsylvania, is the son of Bob Casey, the former governor of Pennsylvania. Former Governor Casey was actually a genuinely very pro-life governor. Senator Bob Casey, his son,
not so much.
Not so much. And it seems like this was a show vote because there are a ton of pro-life Democrats in Pennsylvania to sort of beef up his alleged pro-life bona fides. But I, from my position, I do not find Bob Casey Junior's act to be that great. But you know what? You voted the right way. We'll give you credit.
But I do want to point out one small difference, John, and this is something where it's maddening and frustrating. But I do have to say, you got to give, I think, Joe Manchin much more credit than either Doug Jones or Bob Casey. Because in the case of Bob Casey and Doug Jones, they each are in states that President Trump won in 2016 and that very likely President Trump will win again in 2020. Mm-hmm. Doug Jones will be up for a very tough re-election battle in Alabama.
He will almost certainly lose.
Almost certainly. But
unless they try to renominate Roy Moore.
Yes. Oh gosh. This is no. But theoretically, he could look back at this vote and say, "Hey, look, I voted against Chuck Schumer and my party on this issue. You know, I'm not pro infanticide. You know, I was one of only 3. Blah blah blah."
Yeah.
Doug Jones, this is a totally craven vote. He's doing it for re-election purposes. Bob Casey, I don't know when he's up for re-election, but I think it might be 2020 actually, and I think it's a similar type of thing. Joe Manchin, however, just beat back a very credible fight for re-election in 2018. He was just re-elected to a 6-year term. He will not face the voters of West Virginia again until 2024.
So he's really kind of doing an okay job.
And in his also further defense, he was the only Democrat who voted for Justice Kavanaugh.
That is true.
And he was the only Democrat who stood up and applauded President Trump, saying that we were a pro-life nation in the State of the Union address.
So you know what? This is not a Republican show, everyone. So get off our case.
Kudos, Joe Manchin.
Don't try to call the IRS on us. You ain't going to win.
That's right.
All right. We'll be right back to talk more about this issue and some of the underlying theoretical framework thought behind why Democrats are taking this position right after the break. You're listening to Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. Blues Brothers. This is Think. That was her discoursing with Matt Guitar Murphy as the Blues Brothers attempt to have 4 whole fried chickens, a Coke, and 1 piece of dry bread for dinner at her chicken establishment that she runs with Matt Guitar Murphy. Right to Life Radio with John Girardi. I saw the Blues Brothers this past weekend, and so this show is going to be Blues Brothers Week here on Right to Life Radio. All performances by the Blues Brothers and 1 Italian song. So that's what we're doing this week. The Blues Brothers, by the way, if you haven't watched it in several years, all of you listening out there in Radio Land and Facebook Live Land, go listen to it go watch it, rather. It is the best movie. It's a perfect movie. I don't know how it could be better. It's the funniest, best made, and then I looked up what movies won the Academy Award that year that the Blues Brothers was released. I guess it was the 81 Academy Awards because it was released in 1980 or 81, 82 or something. And it was like 4 movies I had never heard of. Get the bleep out of here. The Blues Brothers was the best.
Yeah, John, but does it have a totally random cameo from Princess Leia? I mean...
Okay, that is the best. That's like the funniest part of it. She keeps showing up and trying to murder them, and then it's only finally at the end that they even acknowledge that she's there. It's hilarious.
It is pretty great. That scene in the sewer tunnel is...
Please don't kill us. I had a flat tire. Some friends came in from out of town. I don't know. Yeah, etc.
Anyway. It wasn't my fault. I swear to God. Yes, it's pretty great.
Anyway, Right to Life Radio with John Girardi.
You owe it to yourself.
Similarly, groveling in the dirt, or should be groveling in the dirt, are all of the Democrats who voted against a bill just to treat kids who survive abortion the same way as any other kids. Hey, there's a transition. We have been talking about the vote in the U.S. Senate this past week on legislation that is aimed to protect children who survive an abortion from infanticide. And that's where I guess the majority of the Democratic Party is right now,
John,
as far as their elected officials go.
Let me make an example here. I mean, call me old-fashioned, call me quaint, but I think
quaint old-fashioned.
I think that if the question is, what should we do for a baby who is born ... What kind of medical care should we provide for a baby who is born? ... I don't think it should really matter what the ... is.
Yeah.
If it is a baby who is born, comma, after the parents tried for multiple years to get pregnant and finally have this beautiful baby. What should we do for this baby who is born, comma, to a mother who snuck across the border and is here?
Yeah. What should we do for a baby who was born when it's the 5th baby and the parents were like, sure, whatever.
Yes. Or what should we do for a baby who was born, comma, surviving a failed abortion attempt? Call me crazy.
All of those questions should have the same answer.
Yes. After the word born, sorry,
All
the
bets
game
are
has
off.
changed.
All bets are off.
Yes.
Well, you would think, I mean, this is a show where we sort of think after conceived, all bets are off.
Yes, I would agree.
But yeah, the fact that the pro-choice side is sort of shifting the terms of the debate. They've now shifted the terms of the debate all the way into the realm of children who are actually now born, and it's almost bizarre. Like, technically, as a production of Right to Life of Central California, there is actually a limited range of topics that I can talk about and express organizational viewpoints on, because Right to Life is not all things to all people, and we don't have positions on every issue under the sun. We don't take positions on tax policy or things like that, for example. This is such extreme abortion legislation that it's almost beyond our organizational we didn't even anticipate that something this evil would be the focus of our organization. So
Yep.
I want to try to explain the theoretical mindset behind this. What we have to understand is that these laws that are justifying, or these politicians who are excuse making for infanticide, for failing to provide an equivalent amount of care to a child because the child is the survivor of an abortion attempt. Okay, treating the child differently once the child is born because the child's a survivor of an abortion attempt. Treating that child differently than you would any other child in the exact same situation, even with the exact same health problems or whatever. What is the theoretical idea behind it? And what this show, basically, the reason why it highlights the fundamental medical ethics problem of abortion, which is, in the context of a pregnant woman, who is the patient? Or who are the patients? Okay, and I guess the way you ask the question gives you the answer. In the context of a pregnant woman who's coming into an OB clinic for service, who are the patients? If the unborn child is a patient, then this justifies and makes sense given all of the kinds of healthcare interventions that are done for pregnant women. This is why you check on the baby's fetal heartbeat during delivery. This is why you check on stuff with the baby. This is why you do ultrasounds of the baby. This is why you look to monitor the baby's heartbeat and the baby's brain activity and whether the baby's moving, whether the baby's x-rays are normal, whether the baby, et cetera, et cetera. But And in the vast majority of cases, we do treat unborn children like a patient, to such an extent that we're now doing prenatal surgeries on unborn children, on children in the womb. There was even a story about a child who was taken out of the mother's womb via C-section, surgery performed on that child put back in the mom's womb. And the question, the hypothetical that immediately rose to my mind was, well, can we now abort that child? I mean, the child was delivered. Once outside the womb, I guess the child you can't abort. But then back in the womb, can you abort? Could you abort a child like that? Regardless, what is the medical ethics justification for abortion given this fundamental question? If an unborn child is a patient, then you can't kill him or her. But if the unborn child is not a patient, then why would you expend healthcare resources to monitor that patient's health and well-being? The answer that the dominant strain of medical ethics thinking, the dominant, and it's a predominantly lefty, liberal, okay with legalized abortion community of medical ethicists, they've basically fallen to the conclusion that an unborn child is rightly considered a patient and the proper object of medical care if the mom wants the baby. If the mom does not want the baby, then the baby is not a patient. And the baby can be the object of an abortion. The baby can be killed. The same baby that you would be performing life-sustaining treatment on, that you would be performing a life-saving surgery on, potentially. The same baby whose heartbeat you would monitor, the same baby who, if something was wrong with that baby, you'd move heaven and earth to save. That baby, if the mom does not want the baby, is no longer a patient and is the proper object of an abortion. So the child's status as a patient is utterly dependent on what another person wants.
John,
which nowhere else in medicine would we ever think that.
This is a horribly macabre example, but just as an example, if you have an ambulance who shows up on the side of the road, a child has been hit by a car, and the
mom's
says,
like, "Hey,
I actually pushed the child in front of the car because I was tired of being a parent." Oh, well, in that case,
all right, that's fine.
Never
Not
mind.
a big deal.
I was going to resuscitate the child, but let's have a conversation first.
Yeah, exactly. Said Governor Northam while scrubbing some black shoe polish off of his face. It was probably him in the ambulance.
Yes.
That was probably Governor Northam. By the
okay.
way, I cannot believe that everyone in Virginia still has their job. The governor, the lieutenant governor, the AG, everybody. Gosh, Virginia's a wacky place.
What do you have to do?
What do you have to do to get fired in Virginia? We'll answer that and other great questions about the sweet mystery of life. Boy, kudos to you if you get that reference. Right here on Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. Thank you all for tuning in to Right to Life Radio here on Power Talk. Power Talk 96.7 AM 1400, that is. The powerhouse radio station where we, Right to Life Radio, broadcast from all throughout this great San Joaquin Valley of ours. Right to Life Radio, thank you all so much for tuning in. A production, as always, of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org, if you want to learn more about us. We've had a busy month. Jonathan. We've had a bunch of crazy laws introduced and defeated and passed in a bunch of different states about late-term abortion and what I'm calling fourth trimester abortion. And now we have the U.S. Senate failing to pass a law to protect children from infanticide after they're born. We at Right to Life Radio had a whole conference about this stuff, which you can listen to right here in this podcast feed. You just go to Apple Podcasts and search for Right to Life Radio. It's right there a couple of episodes ago. So I've been going pretty much a mile a minute. And so, yeah, and things do not seem to be slowing down. As the U.S. Senate, as we've been talking about, failed to pass legislation that would protect children who survive an abortion attempt, protect them by providing them with the same level of care. Now, as we were saying before in the prior segment, the ideology that's underlying this is basically this. In the context of medical ethics, there's this fundamental question when you're dealing with a pregnant woman: who is the patient or who are the patients? And the dominant liberal, pro-choice, pro-abortion medical ethics community, their position predominantly is that the unborn child is a patient, is the proper object of medical care if the mom wants him or her to be. Okay, so the baby's dignity, the baby's status as a moral person, the baby's status as a proper object of medical treatment and care is dependent on the mom. If the mom wants the baby to receive care, then the baby gets care. If the mom wants the baby to be aborted, the baby's aborted. That's genuinely the standard. It's a totally irrational standard because you're basically having another human being decide whether or not to confer human dignity on somebody else. This is at the heart of the Supreme Court decision, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, that basically says at the heart of liberty is the right to decide the meaning of human life. That's basically a quote from Anthony Kennedy, who authored that part of the decision. And thus, with abortion, as a question of our constitutional laws, a question of Supreme Court precedent, we all get to decide for ourselves when other human beings are alive in this one limited context of children who happen to be enclosed within a womb.
But that's the whole issue, isn't it, John? At least in this case, is whether or not
Right.
the child is enclosed inside the womb.
So this is the thing. That is the mindset as it relates to abortion. That is the medical ethics mindset. Then you try to abort a child late term, the child survives. But you've still got this mindset that this baby's human dignity only comes about when the mom wants it to come about. So now you've tried to have an abortion. You've been unsuccessful. The baby is outside of the womb. The baby is still alive. And so what happens is these doctors who have this mindset that the baby only has value if the mom wants it, these doctors have that mindset, and they therefore decide, I guess I won't provide normal resuscitative care to this unborn child like I would for a child who's wanted. Like I would for a child who is just delivered normally, who may be experiencing these same health problems that this baby is facing. I am not going to provide those because this is not a wanted child. This is a child that I tried to abort. I failed to abort.
So John, let me put forth another scenario, and I want to ask this since you're an attorney. I'm just doing a thought experiment here. Let's suppose that you have a
thought experiment.
A married couple who decide that they are going to abort their child.
Okay.
But during the abortion procedure, the child is born alive, but in a tragic, horrible, botched abortion, the mother dies.
Mm-hmm.
But the child is born alive.
Mm-hmm.
Can the father in this situation decide, you know what? I did not carry this child, but I am going to choose to withhold medical treatment from this child and allow this child to die now?
Yeah, probably not. I mean, this is it. You're getting to the rubber meets the road of the fundamental illogic of the abortion position. Well, even the thing I suggested earlier in the show, there was a case I read about a prenatal surgery that was, I guess let's define if we want to call this prenatal. A baby was inside a womb. They needed to do surgery on the baby. They opened up the mom's stomach, took the baby out via C-section, operated on the baby outside of mom's womb, put the baby back into mom's womb. Child gestates and is born normally. So at what point during that whole process would it have been okay to kill the baby? Could you have killed the baby inside the womb before that baby was taken out to have prenatal surgery performed? Yes, you legally could have. Once the baby is taken out of the womb to have surgery performed on him, could you have killed the baby there? Probably not. But then you put the baby back into the mom's womb, and now you can kill. So this baby had no human dignity, got human dignity because he was taken out, lost his human dignity by being put back in, and now won't reclaim his human dignity until he's naturally delivered? I mean, it's a head scratcher. Obviously, Roe v. Wade was not issued with that in mind, but it shows how totally illogical the pro-choice perspective is. There's no genuine difference, meaningful difference between a human baby who happens to be located inside a womb and outside of it. So, thus, when the child survives an abortion, because there's no meaningful distinction between that baby inside and outside a womb, late-term abortion doctors are usually pretty okay with, we'll just let the baby die. We'll just let what I did before have it take its natural course and let this baby die. This is why it's so fundamentally stupid and evil and illogical that these infanticide laws and the opposition to these infanticide laws, it actually makes logical sense because you're basing this child's human dignity on whether or not mom or dad whether or not mom wants them. I have to be careful. Dad has actually
no rights.
100% nothing to say about the whole situation, as we discussed last week on the show. So yeah, that's the fundamental evil, the fundamental illogic of this whole scenario is that basically you're just saying this child's human dignity depends not on anything about who the child is. It has nothing to do with even the child's level of development, really all it has to do with is, does the mom want to keep the baby or not? And I actually attended a lecture about this when I was at Notre Dame last summer. I went to the Vita Institute, which is a really wonderful conference that Notre Dame throws every year. It's a week-long pro-life conference, and it's really great. And I heard a talk given by Colleen Malloy, who's, I believe she's a physician and an expert on these issues of the medical ethics surrounding who is the patient, who is not the patient. And she talked about all kinds of different kinds of surgical treatments, all kinds of things that are being done to unborn children, all these different kinds of medical interventions that are being done to unborn children at really early stages of development, all these different things that are happening. But meanwhile, the medical ethics community is just so bizarrely bigoted, so bizarrely dedicated to this insane, biased attitude in favor of abortion that they're ignoring the fundamental illogic of their own position, the illogic of treating some unborn children, but not others. All right, we're going to talk about what these late-term abortion laws are doing to public opinion. We're going to do that next, right here on Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. This is the Blues Brothers playing the theme from Rawhide. That is Dan Aykroyd singing that. Good Vittles, Lovin' Kissin'. Anyway, Right to Life Radio. It's been Blues Brothers Week here on Right to Life Radio. Why? Because it's a great movie and you should all go watch it.
How do you feel about Blues Brothers 2000?
That was a crime against God and man.
Not on a mission from God?
That was not on a mission from God. That was on a mission from the other place. Be forewarned, kind Christian souls out there. There are one pretty egregious use of the Lord's name in vain, and a couple of F-bombs are dropped. Other than that, pretty clean movie.
Yeah.
There you go.
Especially for the era in which it was made.
Yeah, given... that was actually made fun of in Wayne's World. In Wayne's World, they had this one scene where it flashed on the bottom. Obligatory sex scene.
Yes.
Because like practically every movie in the 80s had to have one sex scene for no reason whatsoever.
Yes.
So anyway, that does not happen in Blues Brothers. So there you go. And all kinds of fun celebrity cameos from John Candy, Twiggy.
Oh.
It's pretty great. Anyway, Right to Life Radio with John Girardi. Go watch the Blues Brothers. Go watch it with your spouse. Go watch it with your friends. You girls. It's ladies' night. All right. So these horrible late-term abortion laws proposed in New York and Virginia and Rhode Island and Vermont, I have been saying from the outset of this, and I don't think I'm some grand prophet or anything. I think a lot of people had the same thought, that this is an unintended benefit of this, if there is any benefit, could be that the Democrats and the pro-choice forces who are trying to push for these incredibly extreme laws could be overplaying their hand. And that this could backfire, and that this could actually shift public opinion away from abortion support. Well, no sooner did we say this than the Marist poll. The Marist poll, which every year in January issues polling data, they release a poll in conjunction with the Knights of Columbus to chart American opinions on abortion. And this is a story from Axios about what Marist has just found after these controversies over late-term abortion. The recent debate, the Axios story goes, the recent debate over, quote, late-term abortion fueled by state measures in New York and Virginia that loosed or sought to loosen abortion restrictions toward the end of a woman's pregnancy has caused, quote, a dramatic shift in public attitudes toward abortion policy, according to Barbara Carvalho, who directed a new Marist poll commissioned by the Knights of Columbus, a Catholic organization. By the numbers, the poll found Americans are now as likely to identify as pro-life, 47%, as they are pro-choice, 47%. What do you know? Last month, a similar Marist survey found that Americans were more likely to identify as pro-choice than pro-life by 55 to 38%, a 17-point gap. The survey also found that 80% of Americans support abortion being limited to the first 3 months of pregnancy, an increase of 5 percentage points since last month's Marist poll. So this is a pretty big shift, and I want to give a kind of historical precedent to this. The biggest shift that changed American attitudes about abortion took place in the 2000s, and it was over the debates about partial birth abortion. The partial birth abortion debates really had a big impact in shifting American viewpoints on abortion.
Thanks in large part to people like Rick Santorum,
Yes.
who got up and in very passionate, emotional debates with a blood-curdlingly cold Barbara Boxer on the floor of the U.S. Senate, talked about what actually happens in an abortion procedure.
Yeah. During a partial birth abortion.
And he entered into the congressional record line drawings of this is, figure 1 through 4 of
this is
what
how it happens.
occurs. And I think, John, the one thing as my Calvinist would say, my Calvinist friends would say, I'm not a Calvinist myself, but as my Calvinist friends would say, as totally depraved as humanity seems to continually reiterate itself to be, even the American public in the 1990s had a smidgen of a conscience left and said, okay, maybe this is not a good thing.
Too far. And that's the thing. The laws that were passed to ban partial birth abortion, they themselves probably didn't save any lives because basically they made this one kind of late-term abortion procedure illegal. Other forms of late-term abortion were still legal. But I think they did save lives indirectly. I think they did save lives indirectly because they shifted American public policy toward abortion radically. So the 90s were sort of the low point for the pro-life movement as far as public support goes. In the 90s, the vast, vast majority of Americans identified as pro-choice. And we now get to this point today where it's pretty much even Steven as far as how people self-identify between pro-life and pro-choice. When you actually dig into what self-identified pro-choice people believe, they're actually far more pro-life than I think they realize.
Yes.
I mean, as this poll mentions, 80% of people think abortion should be limited to the first trimester. That is totally out of step with the Democratic Party platform. The Democratic Party platform and what most Democrats are supporting right now is abortion through all 40 weeks of pregnancy, and not even to support laws that would explicitly ban infanticide of a baby who survives an abortion, who is delivered after surviving an abortion, which, for those of you who didn't listen to the first half of the show, all but 3 Democrats in the U.S. Senate voted against a bill that all it said was, if a baby is delivered after surviving an abortion, that baby should be given the same kind of medical care that any other baby gets. Okay? The same kind of resuscitative care, the same kind of every other kind of care. The fact that the child is not wanted should not be taken into consideration. All but 3 Democrats voted down that legislation. It's not great. There were 3 Republicans who didn't vote on it. But 2 of them, I think, because they missed flight. They had flights delayed and just couldn't miss the vote by a couple minutes. One of them, though, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, I don't think had any such excuse. So there's that. Americans' viewpoints on abortion are changing, and they are changing, I think, significantly for the better. And I think that's that's what we tried to highlight. We at Right to Life of Central California. So for those of you who didn't see the Sunday Fresno Bee the week and a half ago, or 2 weeks ago, I guess, we in the Sunday Fresno Bee published a full-page ad. Thanks to a very generous donor, published a full-page ad laying out all of the different statistics on what people think about abortion, what America's public attitudes towards abortion are, how little public support there is for this. And I think it had a big impact. We got a lot of feedback from people saying, hey, we saw your ad in the paper. Wow, that's That's pretty amazing. So I think we should probably just have that. I can't believe we didn't just post that on our website, but we'll probably by the time you listen to this, it'll be posted on the website. So rtlcc.org if you want to see that full page ad and review the statistics in it. This is a bigger issue than the media gives it credit for. There are more children killed by late-term abortions than are killed by firearms in this country. Okay? We have a huge, raging national debate over gun control policy. In fact, I think from all of the NRA ads I've been bombarded with, I take it that there have been a number of pieces of legislation introduced in the House of Representatives on gun control very recently. It's a huge, ongoing, raging national debate over gun control. Literally more people are killed through late-term abortions than through gun control. We should have at least as big a national conversation about late-term abortion as we do over gun control.
Agree.
Well, since it's a Blues Brothers kind of week and we need an old Italian man segment, thought I'd honor the great city of Chicago, whence the Blues Brothers.
Wondering how you're going to tie that in.
You know, I'm a pretty clever guy here, Jonathan. I don't just give radio shows to anybody. All right. Thank you all so much, folks. That's been it for us at Right to Life Radio. Tune in next week here on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. John Girardi signing off for Right to Life Radio.